The lawyer's envelope trembled in my hands as I read the words that would change everything. Petition for custody, Luna Marie Patterson. 14 years ago, my son-in-law dumped his newborn daughter on my doorstep like she was trash, vanished without a trace, and called her my burden. Now, after all the sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the birthday candles, and the school graduations, he suddenly wanted her back. He wanted my granddaughter, and I wanted justice. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from, because this story is about betrayal so deep, it took me years to even speak it out loud. It's about how one coward's abandonment turned into the fight of my life, and how I turned his arrogance into the very weapon that destroyed him. I'm Ellen Patterson, and at 66, I thought I'd survived every kind of heartbreak life could throw at me. I was wrong.
I still remember that night as if the air itself refused to move. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder cracked over the roof, and the power had gone out for hours. It was just past midnight when I heard the knock. 3 short bangs, hesitant, uncertain, the kind you give when you're not sure if you want someone to answer. I shuffled to the door in my robe, wondering if maybe it was a delivery gone wrong or one of my neighbors needing help. But when I opened the door, my entire life shifted. A basket sat on the porch. Inside, wrapped in a damp pink blanket, was a baby, barely 2 weeks old. Her tiny fists were clenched, her face red from crying. Pinned to the blanket was a note, written in a handwriting I recognized instantly. "She's your problem now. Don't call me." No name, no signature, but I didn't need one. That note belonged to Derek, my son-in-law. He'd married my daughter Olivia only a year earlier, a whirlwind romance that had felt wrong from the start. Olivia was sweet, naive, and hopelessly in love with the wrong kind of man. Derek had charm, the kind that could sell sand in a desert, but behind his easy smile was rot. I'd seen it in the way he looked at people, calculating, always searching for weakness. And now, he'd left his newborn daughter like a piece of trash on my porch. I scooped the baby up, her crying melting into soft hiccups against my chest. Her skin was cold, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and that was the moment I knew. Whatever Derek had done, whatever my daughter had become entangled in, this baby was mine now, not by blood, but by choice. I named her Luna Marie Patterson, after my mother, and after the light that had guided me through darker nights. For the first few days, I barely slept. I fed her, changed her, sang to her in the same soft voice I used to sing to Olivia when she was a baby, but Olivia never came home. 2 weeks passed before the police called. They'd found my daughter's car abandoned near the river, doors open, her purse still inside. There was no sign of her. They said maybe she'd run away. But a mother knows. Something had gone terribly wrong. And the only person who might have known where she was had vanished. The years that followed were brutal. Raising a baby at 52 wasn't what I'd planned for. But Luna gave me purpose. She was everything I didn't know I needed. Stubborn, bright, endlessly curious. She had her mother's soft smile, but her own kind of strength, too. Money was tight, but I made do. I sold my jewelry, picked up sewing again, and worked at the local library 3 days a week. Every night, I'd rock Luna to sleep and whisper, "You were never a burden. You were my second chance." And as she grew, so did her light. By 10, she was reading college-level books. By 12, she was tutoring kids older than her. By 14, the age she was when that envelope came,
She was my reason to get up every morning. Then one Thursday afternoon, the mail arrived. A thick, cream-colored envelope, stamped from a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside, the words that turned my stomach cold. Petition for custody. Luna Marie Patterson. Filed by Derek Weston. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. 14 years? 14 years of silence. No calls, no letters, no help, not even a dime in child support. And now suddenly he wanted her? I sat there, trembling as my mind raced. Why now? What changed? Was he dying? Was this some twisted grab for control? The truth came later, darker than I could have imagined. But in that moment, one thing burned clear. He was not taking her. Not after everything he'd done. Not after abandoning his wife and leaving me to raise their child alone. Not after all those nights I'd held Luna through her nightmares, whispering that she was safe. Safe. I promised myself she'd always be safe. So, when the first court notice came, I didn't crumble. I called an attorney, gathered every record, every photograph, every school report, every single scrap of proof that showed Luna had a real home with me. But beneath the calm, something inside me hardened. Derek hadn't just come for Luna. He'd come for my peace. And this time, I wasn't the woman he could manipulate or walk over. This time, I'd fight. And if I had to destroy him to protect her, so be it. Because sometimes revenge isn't rage, sometimes it's patience. And I'd been patient for 14 long years. The first time I saw Derek again after 14 years, I didn't even recognize him. He walked into the courtroom wearing a $1,000 suit and a smirk that hadn't aged a day. But the shine in his eyes was gone, replaced by something colder, emptier. His hair was thinner, his skin tighter around his cheekbones, but that same arrogance radiated off him like cologne. When he saw me, he gave a slow, deliberate smile, like he was greeting an old acquaintance, not the woman who had raised his child, the woman he'd betrayed. He looked me up and down before saying, "You look tired, Ellen. Must be hard raising a teenager at your age." I wanted to respond. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would pierce the thick layer of smugness covering his face. But Luna was standing right beside me, her hand in mine, small but steady. So I just smiled back and said softly, "Some of us don't quit when things get hard." For the first time, that smirk faltered. The hearing started, and Derek's lawyer, a slick man with 2 white teeth, began spinning a story so polished it could have fooled anyone who didn't know the truth. According to them, Derek had made mistakes in his youth. He had gone through financial hardship. He had deep regret over leaving his daughter behind, and now, with his new life on track, he wanted to make amends. He painted himself as the victim of circumstance, a poor man, quote, haunted by his past. And me? I was an older woman struggling to keep up. He even had the nerve to suggest Luna, quote, deserved a more stable environment. Stable? I almost laughed right there in court. For 14 years, I had been her stability. When she was sick, I was there. When she was bullied in middle school, I was there. When she cried herself to sleep asking why her parents didn't love her, I was there. And this man, this coward, was trying to erase all of it with a few rehearsed lines and crocodile tears. When it was my turn to speak, my lawyer gently squeezed my arm. He'd warned me to stay calm. He said, "Judges like composure." But when I looked at Derek sitting there pretending to be a father, Something inside me cracked. "I raised Luna alone," I began, my voice steady but firm. "She has a home, a school she loves, friends who adore her, and every memory of her childhood has me in it, not him." I looked straight at Derek. He left her on my doorstep with a note that said, "She's your burden. That's the kind of father you're hearing from today." Derek's lawyer immediately objected, calling it irrelevant, but the judge waved him off. For a brief moment, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of my heart pounding. Then Derek stood up, uninvited. His voice rose loud and defensive. "That note was a mistake," he barked. "I was angry, scared. I didn't mean it." The judge told him to sit down, but the damage was done. For the first time, his polished mask slipped. After the hearing, I stepped outside, exhausted. The courthouse steps felt steeper than I remembered. I just wanted to go home, make Luna dinner, and forget the sound of his voice. But he followed me. "Ellen," he called out. When I turned, his face was softer. Too soft. The fake kind of remorse that never reaches the eyes. He said, "I didn't mean for things to get ugly. You know how lawyers are." I stayed silent. Then, lowering his voice, he added, "You could make this easy. Let me have some custody. Joint, even. I'll make it worth your while." There it was. The truth, finally bleeding through his mask. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about regret. It was about control. "You think you can buy her?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "I'm offering you a chance to retire comfortably. I've done well for myself, Ellen. I can give her the kind of life you can't." The words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because they reminded me of all the nights I'd spent wondering if I was enough for Luna. I took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Derek," I said softly, "you can't buy what you already threw away." And then I walked past him. Over the next few weeks, Luna started to change. She was quieter, more withdrawn. I'd find her sitting on the porch at night staring at the stars. When I asked what was wrong, she just said, "He keeps calling, Grandma. He says he's changed." My stomach twisted. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "people like him don't change. They just get better at pretending." But she was curious, like her mother. She wanted to believe there was good in him. She wanted to know why he'd come back. And I knew I couldn't protect her forever by hiding the truth. So one night, I told her everything. The note, the abandonment, the police, even the day I found Olivia's car by the river. By the end of it, tears streamed down her cheeks. She looked at me with something between heartbreak and fury. "I hate him," she whispered. "How could he do that to Mom?" I reached for her hand. I told her, "Hatred will only eat you alive. But truth? Truth will destroy him." A few days later, I got a call from a friend, someone who worked at the county office. She sounded nervous. "Ellen, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but Derek's finances are being investigated. He's in deep trouble. Taxes, fraud, everything." And just like that, it clicked. That's why he wanted Luna. Not for love, not for redemption. He wanted money. If he could claim custody, he could access Olivia's old trust, the one meant for Luna when she turned 18. 14 years of silence, and now he was crawling back because he needed her inheritance? I felt the heat rise in my chest. He hadn't just abandoned Luna, he was trying to use her. And that's when I decided this fight wasn't going to stay in court. I'd let the law play its part, sure, but I was going to make sure Derek learned that some debts can't be erased with apologies or lawyers. He wanted to play father for money.
I was going to show him what it cost to betray a mother's love. Because while Derek thought I was an old woman fighting a losing battle, what he didn't know was that I had one weapon he'd never expect. The truth he'd spent 14 years burying. And I was about to dig it up.
For days after that phone call, I couldn't stop thinking about what my friend had said. Fraud, investigations, trouble. Derek's sudden reappearance made perfect sense now. He wasn't coming back for redemption. He was coming back for survival. He needed Luna's trust fund to pull himself out of whatever financial hell he'd dug. And he thought I was too old, too soft, too sentimental to fight back. He'd forgotten who raised his daughter. He'd forgotten who raised him by proxy, because for a while before everything went wrong, I'd been there too. I'd fed him, trusted him, even defended him to my own daughter when everyone else warned me he was trouble. But I'd learned my lesson. So this time, I wasn't just going to defend Luna. I was going to end him. I started quietly. Every night after Luna went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and my old laptop. I searched for Derek Weston, business owner, entrepreneur, motivational speaker. His name popped up everywhere. At first glance, he looked successful. Too successful. His company's website showed glossy photos, smiling staff, sleek offices. But the deeper I looked, the more the cracks showed. The staff photos were stock images. The partners listed had no online presence. And the company's address? It traced back to a P.O. box in another state. He was running a facade. The man who'd thrown his daughter's life away was now peddling lies for a living. But I needed proof, not suspicions. So I reached out to my friend, the one who'd tipped me off. "Can you get me anything concrete?" I asked quietly over the phone. She hesitated. "Ellen, I could lose my job." "I understand," I said gently. "Then just point me where to look." She sighed. "Check the public filings, county records. There are complaints filed under his company's name, people he scammed." That was enough. By the end of the week, my dining table was covered in printouts, sticky notes, and timelines, lawsuits, fake loans, investors who never got paid, a pattern of deceit stretching years back. Each piece of paper was like a puzzle, and when I stepped back to look at it all, the image was clear. Derek was collapsing, and fast. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I'd look at Luna, her backpack by the door, her sketches pinned to the fridge, her laughter echoing through the hallway, and that pity evaporated. He'd thrown away everything that mattered, and now he wanted to drag her into the ruins of his own greed? No, not on my watch. The next court date was approaching, and I could feel the tension tightening around the house. Luna tried to act strong, but I could tell the thought of seeing him again made her stomach twist. He keeps saying he's changed, that he just wants a chance. I smiled softly. "Sweetheart, a man who changes doesn't need to say it. You just see it." She frowned. "Then what should we do?" I said, "We let him talk. Let him lie. The louder he speaks, the deeper he'll bury himself." Because while he was busy performing in court, I was building something much quieter. A trap, made of his own past. A week later, I found what I needed. Buried deep in one of the public complaint files was the name of a woman, Rachel Linton. She'd filed a claim saying Derek had taken $40,000 from her under false pretenses for a business partnership. I looked her up on social media and found her profile. A professional-looking woman in her 30s, serious eyes, sharp smile. Something told me she'd be willing to talk. I sent her a message. Hello, Rachel. I believe we both have been hurt by the same man. I'm not asking for money or pity, just the truth. She replied within an hour. You mean Derek Weston? You have no idea how much I've wanted someone to ask me about him. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe the next morning. Rachel was everything Derek wasn't: honest, direct, and strong. She told me how he'd charmed her into investing in his expanding business, how he promised her partnership and profit, only to disappear after draining the account. She said he's poison, always playing victim. I filed reports, but he has a way of wriggling out of everything. I said, not this time. Her eyes flickered. You have a plan. I nodded. Something that ends his performance for good. She smiled. Then I want in. Together we began to dig deeper. Rachel still had emails, contracts, and text messages, all signed by Derek himself. We compiled everything into a folder, evidence of fraud, manipulation, and theft. I sent copies to my lawyer anonymously. I didn't need to say where it came from. I only said, you might want to show this to the judge. The day of the next hearing, Derek walked in confident as ever. His lawyer carried himself like he'd already won. But something was different this time. The judge had papers spread in front of him, the same ones I'd sent. As the proceedings began, Derek's lawyer tried to push his narrative again, how Derek had changed, how he only wanted to reconnect. Then the judge interrupted. Mr. Weston, are you aware there are several ongoing investigations against you for financial misconduct? Derek froze. The room went dead silent. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. The judge leaned back, unimpressed. We'll see. These records were submitted anonymously, but they appeared to contain legitimate evidence. Until this matter is resolved, your custody petition is suspended. Suspended. That one word hit him like a bullet. He looked around wildly, eyes landing on me, and for the first time, I saw fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. When we walked out of the courtroom, Luna squeezed my hand. Grandma, did you do that? I smiled faintly. I didn't have to. The truth did. But inside, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Derek don't just disappear quietly. They double down. They get desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. So, that night, around midnight, I heard a car pull up outside my house. My heart jumped. I peeked through the window. Derek. He stood on the lawn, shoulders tight, his face barely visible under the streetlight. Then he shouted, You think you've won? You think you can ruin me? I opened the door, calm, composed. He was drunk. I could smell it from feet away. You ruined yourself, I said softly. You have just stopped you from taking someone down with you. He stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. She's mine, Ellen. You can't keep her forever. I smiled. Watch me. Then I closed the door. The sound of his car tires screeching away burned into my memory. That was the night I realized he wasn't going to stop. He'd lost control of the story, and men like Derek don't forgive that. So I started preparing for the next round. Not in court, but in life. If he wanted a war, I'd give him one. But I'd fight it my way. Quietly, cleverly, and with precision. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't need to scream. It whispers. And it waits.
When a predator loses his mask, he scratches at the glass until his hands bleed. Derek was scratching. Hard. After the court suspended his petition, I expected him to fade into the shadows. Instead, he grew louder, sending threatening messages, showing up at Luna's school under the pretense of checking on her, and leaving roses at my gate with notes that read, You'll regret this, Ellen. Harassment is a different kind of cruelty. It's not about one big wound, it's about 1,000 tiny ones that keep reopening. They're meant to wear you down until you make mistakes. Derek counted on that. He misjudged me. Documentation, not drama. My first rule, never engage without evidence. If he screamed at me in person, I'd record nothing, but every call, every text, every anonymous note, I archived. I printed copies, time-stamped them, saved metadata. I labeled each file like a meticulous librarian. Date, type, source. It took hours, it took patience, but if you're going to dismantle a man built on lies, you must first catalog the lie. I also told Luna to stop answering his calls. Let him talk to the wind, I said. It'll tire him out. She did. She cried sometimes, snapped at herself, asked if she'd ever be safe. I held her and reminded her that safety is not a feeling, it's a plan. Planting seeds. While Derek thrashed, I planted seeds in places he couldn't imagine. First, the county prosecutor. I arranged a meeting through an acquaintance who owed me a favor, an honest woman tired of men who used charm as camouflage. I didn't make dramatic speeches. I slid the folder across her mahogany desk and said plainly, "This is his pattern." She read, brows knit, then picked up the phone. That call would begin a financial audit Derek could not sidestep. Second, the press. Not sensationalist tabloids, reputable local reporters who cared about community harm. I met one of them over coffee and showed him the evidence of the fraud victims, the emails, the forged invoices, and the beach house footage of Derek threatening to make things right through any means necessary. He listened, asked 2 intelligent questions, and promised discretion until the court allowed comment. His promise was a blade, slow but inevitable. Third, his clients and so-called partners. I quietly contacted several of them, sharing photocopies of contracts and messages proving Derek had bilked them. One by one, phone calls were made. One by one, accounts were frozen. One by one, people who had once praised him for his vision began to wonder if that vision was a con. The public unraveling. The first domino fell subtle and clean. A short investigative piece ran in the Sunday paper. Local entrepreneur under scrutiny, multiple complaints filed. The headline was clinical, the effect was catastrophic. Social media, his lifeblood, exploded. Sponsors paused contracts. A charity rescinded a gala invitation. People who had accepted his handshake in trust now avoided eye contact. Derek reacted the only way he knew, with bluster and graceless theatrics. He posted a 3-minute video claiming he was the victim of a smear campaign, that I was an obsessed grandmother, and that Luna deserved a father. The clip was clumsy, defensive, and it invited scrutiny rather than sympathy. Within days, his bank accounts were flagged. A creditor froze a line of credit. His phone, which had once rung with opportunity, now buzzed with collection calls and threatening letters. The man who'd swaggered into court, silver tie flashing, began sleeping in shifts, pacing his apartment like a caged animal. When desperation turns dangerous, desperation makes mistakes. It makes men take risks they wouldn't otherwise. Calls to ex-lovers, threats left in voicemail, even a drunken drive past my home in the dead of night. One evening, Luna found a folded photograph under our front gate, a shot of her playing in the yard when she was 6, corners creased, a single word scrawled on the back, claimed. She cried until she fell asleep in my lap. That photo became Exhibit A and a restraining order we filed that very afternoon. When the sheriff's deputy came to serve it, Derek showed up at the courthouse in a different suit, cheaper, ill-fitting like a costume that didn't belong. He spat venom, swore retribution. The deputy, a man who's seen men at their worst, looked at Derek with a cold patience and said, "You'll follow these terms, Mr. Weston, or there will be consequences." That night, he tried to break into a storage unit where I had kept old family boxes. A neighbor called the police when they saw a shadowy figure on the cameras. He was arrested for trespassing. The charges were minor, but the arrest photo, unshaven, wild-eyed, traveled fast. The narrative shifted again from slick entrepreneur to desperate, dangerous man. The legal noose tightened.
The prosecutor's office, fed with documents I'd provided and the complaints from Derek's victims, moved quickly. An indictment for wire fraud and embezzlement followed. His assets were frozen pending investigation. The custody petition was again delayed, this time not because of legal maneuvering, but because a judge could not, in good conscience, hand a child over to a man facing criminal charges. I never celebrated his misfortune out loud, but the relief when Luna curled up against me the night the indictment was announced felt like the first real exhale since that rainy night 14 years ago. Still, I knew the system had limits. Even with criminal charges, men like Derek wiggle. They find loopholes. They buy time. So I set the final pieces in place. The final play. The climax I planned had to be clean, irrefutable, and public. Mere courtroom victories would not suffice. If Derek's reputation crumbled only inside legal documents, his supporters might whisper that I'd bribed the system. I needed the world to see him for what he was: manipulative, dangerous, and small. I coordinated with the investigative reporter. On the morning the indictment was unsealed, the paper posted the long-form piece online. The web he wove, how Derek Weston built a house of cards. It included interviews with clients, victims, the prosecutor, and, crucially, the footage of Derek in the beach house, drunk and threatening, captured months earlier. The video played like a confession. The headline trended within hours. Funders pulled support. His investors demanded audits. A charity rescinded his membership. Even his mother, who had once defended him, stopped taking his calls. His office was raided by federal agents. Lights, badges, evidence bags. His empire collapsed in real time. I watched the live stream in my kitchen as the cameras captured men carting out boxes of files. Derek's phone, his laptop, his smug camera-friendly face, all were evidence now. He tried to call me that night. His number flashed on my phone once, twice, 3 times in rapid fire. I let it ring out. He left a message, voice ragged, begging for mercy. In the past, I might have been moved. This time, I felt nothing but cold clarity. Aftermath. Friends told me I'd been vindicated. Strangers called me a savior. Luna read the headlines and clung to me as if the words were armor. Sometimes, revenge feels awful, like holding a hot coal in both hands, but this had been different. This had been careful, legal, and necessary. We'd won the battle of truth, but the war of healing would take longer. Derek's trial loomed. There would be more hearings, appeals, and possibly ugly courtroom theatrics. He'd try to claw back some shred of dignity. Men like him always do. So I prepared. I archived every call, every message, every threatening note in 3 separate locations. I prepped witnesses. I arranged for victim statements. I made sure Luna's school counselors were on call. I met with the prosecutor to make sure the custody petition could not be revived amidst the chaos. And one late night, as the house lay still, Luna asleep upstairs, I sat at my kitchen table and allowed myself a small, private smile. The man who left a baby at my doorstep thought he could return and take her away. He had underestimated the quiet force of a woman with nothing left to lose. He had unleashed a storm, and now he would watch it drown him.
The courthouse smelled like old paper and fear. Even after all these months, I could still recognize his cologne. Sharp, artificial, like the man himself. Derek Weston sat across the aisle in a cheap gray suit, his jaw twitching every time the prosecutor spoke his name. His lawyer had quit 2 weeks before the trial, citing ethical conflicts. The new one looked tired already. It had been nearly 15 years since the night I found Luna asleep in a basket on my porch, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of her mother, my daughter. And now here we were, facing the man who'd left her there, like she was nothing more than a burden he couldn't carry. The testimony. When they called me to the stand, I felt my heart hammer against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The prosecutor's questions were simple. Mrs. Patterson, How long have you had custody of your granddaughter? 14 years. Did Mr. Weston ever provide financial support during that time? Not a single dollar. Can you tell the court about the night she was left with you? I told them everything. The note, the silence, the endless nights of worry. My voice didn't shake. It carried. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Derek's eyes darted between me and the floor, as if searching for a crack to crawl into. Then came the video. The one from the beach house, where he admitted to his friend that leaving Luna had been a smart business move. The friend, who'd turned on him after the fraud charges, had handed over the footage willingly. The room filled with his slurred voice. "She's better off with that old woman. I don't have time for diapers and crying. Kids are a liability." Luna sat beside the prosecutor, face pale but steady. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, the man who'd abandoned her, with a kind of detached pity that hurt more than hatred ever could. The collapse. Derek tried to defend himself. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd left Luna with me temporarily, that he'd been struggling, that I'd poisoned her against him. But the evidence was stacked too high. The bank records, the fraud victims, the threats, the recordings. Every lie he told was met with proof to the contrary. His downfall wasn't cinematic, it was clinical. Paperwork, witnesses, signatures. But in that slow dismantling, I saw something extraordinary. The moment a manipulator realizes the mirror won't protect him anymore. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts of fraud, falsifying documents, and endangerment of a minor, I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes and exhaled for the first time in 14 years. Derek was sentenced to 10 years without parole. But his punishment didn't end there. The court awarded me permanent custody of Luna, legally erasing any claim he could ever make. His business assets were liquidated to repay victims. His name, once whispered with respect, became shorthand for disgrace. The gift of peace. That night, after the trial, Luna and I drove to the beach. Our place, the one I used to take her when she had nightmares. She sat quietly, watching the waves lick at the shore. "Is it really over, Grandma?" "Yes," I said. "It's over for him. But for us, it's the beginning." She turned to me, eyes wet but steady. "You never gave up on me." I smiled. "Because you were never the problem, Luna. You were the reason." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, the sound of the ocean didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. The final revenge. A week later, I received a letter from Derek. No apology. Of course not. Just self-pity and blame. "You destroyed my life," he wrote. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into the fireplace. The flames licked the paper like it was devouring the last trace of his existence. Then I did one more thing. I gathered every photograph, every document tied to him, and sealed them in a box labeled, "For Luna, open when ready." Because someday she'd need to understand that her grandmother's revenge wasn't about anger, it was about protection. About teaching a lesson that silence, when wielded with patience and truth, can be the sharpest weapon of all. Reflection. People still ask if I regret it, if destroying a man, even one like Derek, was worth it. They don't understand. I didn't destroy him. He did that himself. All I did was shine a light bright enough that he couldn't hide anymore. And when you've been through the kind of betrayal that shatters the bones of your trust, you learn something profound. Revenge isn't screaming or slamming doors or shouting your pain to the world. It's in the calm, the patience, The moment your enemy finally realizes that the woman they underestimated has been quietly building the fire that will burn down their lies. Epilogue. 3 years later, Luna graduated high school as valedictorian. Her speech ended with a line that made every hair on my arm stand up. To my grandmother, who taught me that love is strength and that sometimes justice doesn't need noise, only time. The audience erupted in applause. I stood there, tears spilling freely, feeling the ghosts of every sleepless night fade into peace. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about Derek. It was about reclaiming our story. And in that courtroom, on that beach, and finally in that auditorium, we did.